first. My name is Alex Scrivener. I'm a director of the Democratic Security Institute in Tbilisi in Georgia. I just wanted to welcome you all to our latest in our series of panel discussion roundtable events brought to you by DSI with the support of National Endowment of Democracy as part of the Eurasia Democratic Security Network project, or EDSN project. For those of you joining us for the first time, DSI is a newly established organization based in Tbilisi in Georgia. We are concentrated on the interrelationship between democracy and security in the Eurasian region. EDSN is a now project that's been going on for over 5 years, concentrating on this very connection between democracy and security. And this relationship is very key to understanding events in the Black Sea region, which is the subject of today's event, which is the role of Turkey in the Caucasus and the Black Sea region in the wake of Erdoğan's victory in the Turkish general election a few weeks ago. Turkey's role in the region has been seen as somewhat of a sleeping giant, as all of you will know, over the last 3 decades since the collapse of the Soviet Union. Turkey has a very unique position in the region, being as it is both a key NATO ally and therefore a kind of key westward locus, I guess, for the South Caucasus region, and a key Black Sea ally for Ukraine. Under Erdoğan, of course, Turkey's foreign policy has shifted to become even more multi-vector than it was before. So it had very famously under the former foreign minister and then prime minister, and now no longer in AKP, foreign minister Ahmet Davutoglu, he brought in the very famous no enemies, no conflicts to our neighbors policy. And since then, although Davutoglu is now long gone, the Erdoğan foreign policy has been very much one of multi-vector relationships with all the other countries in the region. And relations with Russia specifically have been rather changeable over the last 2 decades, and shifted very much on a kind of flipping from one side to the other, sometimes from confrontation to dialogue and partnership. And this kind of interesting role that Turkey has in the region has really been put in the spotlight, obviously, by the war in Ukraine. And now Turkey is positioning itself, attempting to position itself as a sort of mediator between Russia, Ukraine, and the West, and everyone else, even though it is itself a NATO ally. And obviously, Turkey now has a new role in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Turkey has a role for the first time in the peacekeeping settlement there. It is not the prime role. That's still obviously down to the Russian peacekeepers there, although I still cringe as a Georgian when I see the words Russian and peacekeeper together, because I never believe it. But yeah, Turkey has a new role there in Nagorno-Karabakh, and also somewhat counterintuitively, if you didn't know the whole context, the war in Nagorno-Karabakh, the second war of 2020, has once again opened up the possibility of relations between Turkey and Armenia becoming somewhat normalized, and the possibility even of the border between Armenia and Turkey being opened for the first time since 1993. And it really would be a historic shift if that were to be the case. I was there myself, actually, a few weeks ago. I went to the Turkey-Armenia border, and you can see very much there, it does not look like a border that's about to be opened right now. It has Russian military presence on the Armenian side with big Russian flags, and on the Turkish side, there is, a similar kind of infrastructure, but less extreme. So, but things change in the region, and it's for the first time in decades that possibility is now opened up as at least something that could happen in the very near future. So it's a very exciting and interesting time, and obviously now with President Erdoğan's re-election, we now have a guaranteed 5-year, I never say that actually in this region, never say this, but I was going to say guaranteed 5 years of stability in terms of what we can expect from Turkey, but you never know. But anyway, we can expect 5 more years of President Erdoğan, and you expect without other great changes, what we will see what the Turkish government stance in the region will be. And on this, we have 3 foremost experts on the region to discuss this with us today, and I'm very proud to introduce all of them. I'll start by introducing Professor Mustafa Aydin, who's the Professor of International Relations at Kadir Has University in Istanbul, and also the President of the International Relations Council of Turkey, Professor Aydin's expertise on the Black Sea region is so well known that I've often seen him being referred to on several occasions, actually, in different contexts, as Mr. Black Sea. So it is a great privilege to have you, Mr. Black Sea, to explain and discuss with us what Turkey's policy on the Black Sea and the region has in store over the next 5 years of the Erdoğan government. We also have with us our very own Marina Varatnyuk, who is based in London and is an associate fellow at the Royal United Services Institute in London, or RUSI, as people well know. She's also a fellow here at Democratic Security Institute and is a senior lecturer on our certificate course on democratic security. Now, Marina may be Ukrainian, but she's also a true one-person Black Sea bridge, as she is one of the country's foremost experts on Turkey, as well as being an expert on the region as a whole, and is fluent in the Turkish language. So we couldn't possibly have hoped for someone with greater expertise on this subject than Marina to talk with us today. And finally, and last but not least at all, I introduce our Armenian colleague who is with us today, Arik Kochinian, who is president of the Research Center on Security Policy. He's a historian, a political scientist, and had 4 years of experience as an expert on security and transitional issues, with hundreds of TV, radio, press, and other media interviews, articles, and lectures behind him, 10 years of working experience in NGOs and management, and also experience in the fields of regional development, national security, public relations, and is the expert person of the National Security Council of the Republic of Armenia and the ex-president of the Enlight Public Research Center. Is there anything you haven't done, Eric? I think it sounds like you've done everything there. But I did meet Eric recently for the first time at a recent regional security conference, and I personally was so impressed by his analysis that I immediately approached him and asked him if he would be willing to cooperate with us in the future. And this is the first time we've got Eric with us to do this. So I'm very, very happy to see him here, and definitely keep your expectations high, because they will be met when it comes to Eric's analysis on the region. From an Armenian perspective, it's very interesting. So having introduced all three of our illustrious speakers, I'd like to hand the floor to our first, and that's Professor Aydin, to give us his perspective on what we can expect from Turkey under Erdogan for the next 5 years in the South Caucasus and Black Sea region as a whole. Go ahead, Mustafa.
Okay, thank you, Alexander. Let me emphasize from the beginning that there might be some problem with my internet connection, that I'm connected with the university here. I hope it will keep. Otherwise, I'll have already apologized for that. In Turkey, let me start with general observation after the government change. We were, as Turkish academics, in last 6 months or even a year, the only question that we were asked everywhere, what would happen for Turkish foreign policy if there is a government change? And of course, behind the minds of the people who were asking the question was that they were expecting a government change from the current AKP leadership to opposition leadership. And I always been very careful to emphasize that whoever win the elections, there will be a government change in Turkey. Even Erdoğan continue to become president, there will be a government change. One of my reasons, basic reason for that was President Erdoğan in political life has been very pragmatic and has changed alliances quite often, both in domestic politics and international affairs. In domestic politics, we have seen him aligned with the liberals when he came to power in 2002. Then he was aligned with what you might call moderate Islamists. Then in his last term, he has been aligned with Turkish nationalists and what some Turks in Turkey we call Eurasianists in Turkey. Now, after the latest election and with the appointment of new government, the expectation in Turkey that new government will be much more, let's say, let me put it this way, less political and more institutional. As far as foreign policy is concerned, the people who are now being appointed in different institutions are already showing signs that there will be people who would put more emphasis on diplomacy and institution building rather than a personalized foreign policy. Whether this promise will happen or not, I don't know, obviously, but this seems to be the current talk in Turkey, at least. Of course, having said this, we all know President Erdoğan likes to have leadership meetings and what you might call leadership diplomacy. He prefers that, and he actually seeks for it. And he always enjoys the leaders when he has these interlocutors on the other side of the table, leaders he can talk to and do direct deals with. This is one of the reasons actually he has find it easy to deal with Russia, for example. He and Putin had already known each other for quite a long time now, feel each other, they know how much they could expect from each other, and etc. And in this way, Erdoğan also finds it, I think, easier to go around institutions and diplomacy and bureaucracy in different countries and with his interlocutors. He's a direct policy, he likes this direct policy making. So regarding this next 5 years, if it's going to be 5 years, of course, I should emphasize and I should expect much of the same from President Erdoğan, not much of a change on his policies and emphases, especially in foreign policy. In recent years, Turkey's emphasis in foreign policy has been this idea of what I would call strategic autonomy. And it relates to Turkey's connection to its long-standing Western alliance partners. There has been a notion and understanding in Turkey that the Western alliance is dominated by the United States and dominated by the interest of the United States, and the US usually do not take much of attention of its regional allies. Turkey feels itself a kind of a different, unique, let me say, unique case of an ally being in the corner of the Western alliance, the former south flank of NATO. Now, even that is being debated. You know, Turkey is kind of in the different flank zones of NATO. We are touching to the southern flank, we are touching to the eastern flank, and we are touching to the northern flank in a sense. That creates a kind of a unique position because Turkey has all this regional interest, not much like with other NATO allies. Maybe kind of countries like Poland might understand Turkish position. You know, our interest in Middle East is not much with any other NATO alliance partners, or in the Caucasus, maybe even in the Black Sea. So in that sense, Turkey feels that when the United States, the biggest partner of the alliance, come to these regions and start setting up policy options, that usually ignores Turkey's regional policies. And that has prompted this call and search for strategic autonomy in its foreign policy. What all this means in Black Sea and the Caucasus is, of course, a kind of a balanced relationship with the bigger power of the region, that's the Russian Federation. As you might recall easily, that Turkey had this intense competition with Russia, covering all Central Asia, Caucasus, and part of the Black Sea in the early 1990s and even in the early 2000s. This intense competition was rested on a number of aspects, but mainly it was on political influence and energy gain. And Turkey was supported by the Western alliance and especially by the United States in its competition with Russia. However, this started to change after 9/11. After 9/11, the United States decided to be present by itself in sub-regions of the world, which included Black Sea and the Caucasus. So when the US came to the Caucasus, this resulted in a period of what I would call U.S. interregnum in the Caucasus, because no matter what, Turkey was the close ally of the United States at the time. But when U.S. comes to a region like the Caucasus, it has to create a space for itself, for its policy making. And the first countries that he pushes around is its allies. U.S. takes up all the space, and then Turkey, in a sense, was kind of sidelined in the Caucasus, and this left a kind of a space for competition between U.S. and Russia in the Caucasus, a very intense competition, actually, which involved military and security dimensions, which ended with Russia going war with Georgia in 2008. And that ended what I would call U.S. interregnum. And after that, 2008, we have seen U.S. withdrawal from the region, both from the Caucasus and also the Black Sea. I don't want to say that U.S. lost interest, but definitely it has withdrawn from the region, having been unable to respond to Russian aggression in Georgia. After that, this is the period where Turkey started to seek a new balance with Russia in wider geography, from Central Asia to Eastern Europe. By 2010, 2012, Turkey and Russia came a new kind of an understanding, a new balance, both in Caucasus and in the Black Sea. This period also coincided with refocusing Turkey's focus into the Middle East. So moving away from these regions and intense competition was also in line with Turkish new interest in the Middle East. With this new balance in the Caucasus and the Black Sea, what came is kind of a common understanding, keeping these regions out of reach to the Western partners of Turkey, and having what some people call Turkish-Russian condominium. This was actually the Romanians initially mentioned this about the Black Sea, and they were complaining about this for the Black Sea, that there existed Turkish-Russian condominium. They use it as a criticism. But I would say that this condominium now expanded into the Caucasus also. The two countries have found a modus operandi now, both in the Caucasus and the Black Sea, and value the stability that it brings. Of course, when I say stability, some people are not very happy about this, because stability doesn't bring peace to everybody. Right? It's not always preferable. But being a veteran of the Cold War, which Turkey was a veteran of the Cold War, at the forefront of the Cold War, Turkey values stability over anything else in these regions, especially when it's faced with Russia. Of course, it's against the interest of the regional countries where Russia puts its footprint, where Russia become aggressive and use forces. But these are, when you look at the overall picture, these are not necessarily threatening per se for Turkish interest in the region, both in the Caucasus and in the Black Sea. So this is the first kind of a Turkey's preference will be the next 5 years. The stability may be even for the detriment of some of the regional countries' security. But having said this, Turkish-Russian modus operandi, the one that is developed, is very interesting. It not only cooperation, as you know and as you follow. I came up with the word cooperative competition. Turkey cooperates with Russia on a number of aspects, but at the same time competes with Russia in different theaters of operation. Turkey has been the only NATO country who shut down a Russian airplane since 1945. Right? Turkey has been the only NATO country who actively opposed Russian military forces or Russian-supported military forces in different theaters, like in Syria, in Libya, If you count Nagorno-Karabakh between Azerbaijan and Armenia, that also includes, and now in Ukraine. So this is a kind of a very interesting understanding of each other. We do understand each other's interest, and we try to not step on the toes of each other. And it seems that the two countries also do understand the limitations of the possible cooperation. Russia do not push Turkey too much to cooperate with Russia more, because it knows that Turkey is not going to leave the Western alliance. And same is true, I think, for the United States. They also understand. Regarding the Black Sea, at the moment, of course, Ukraine is the big issue. But I said this number of places in number of talks, Ukraine for Turkey is a regional security issue. It's not a defining issue for Turkish foreign policy or Turkish security policies. Whereas, for example, Syria is a survival issue for Turkish foreign policy because it touches to the borders of Turkey. It affects the security of the country because of the Kurdish existence in the northern Syria and operation of PKK forces in northern Syria and US support to them. As long as this continues there, Turkey needs Russia to balance United States in Syria. So as long as this equation exists in Syria, Turkey will be friendly to Russia whenever possible in different theaters of operation. So if you put Syria as a survival issue for Turkey, Eastern Mediterranean and Asian issues and conflict with Greece would be national security issues for Turkey. And as I said, Ukraine will be regional security issue for Turkey. So there is this kind of different dimensions of looking at it. Having said all this, let me put also three things and three aspects of Turkey's Ukraine and Russia-Ukraine policy so that we'll discuss from it. First of all, the fact that Turkish government does not or wish not to highlight what it's doing in Ukraine creates a kind of a low profile. Turkish government prefers a low profile because making it a high profile generates criticism either from its Western allies or from Russia. So Turkey likes to keep it low profile, but saying that Turkey keeps low profile in Ukraine doesn't mean that Turkey is not an active player there. That's the first thing. Second is, I would argue that Turkey is a not neutral country as far as Russia-Ukraine war is concerned. There are some arguments about that, but Turkey is not a neutral country. Turkey is actively supporting Ukraine with number of military support, security supports, intelligence support, and whatnot. And this is accepted by Russia as much as whether they like it or not, they do accept it because then Turkey does not participate with Western sanctions on Russia. So this creates a sort of a balance there. Russia does not expect more from Turkey, for example. In a recent piece that I wrote with a friend of mine, we looked into this policy and what Turkey has been doing in this war. The list is so long, actually, what Turkey has been doing. First of all, Turkey was the first country after Ukraine to declare the war as a war. There was a debate whether that was a special operations or what not. Turkey is on the second day of the conflict or occupation, Turkey declared that this is a war, so it warrants to close the Bosphorus, the straits, Turkish straits, because of the Montreux Convention. And having closed the straits, Turkey applies this beyond the Montreux Convention regulations, because Montreux Conventions allows Turkey to close the straits to the warring countries, to Ukraine and to Russia and their warships only. And these two countries also have a right to bring their warships to the Caucasus, to the Black Sea, if those ships belong to their Black Sea fleet. But having closed the straits, Turkey asked Russia not to bring any more ships into the Black Sea, even if they belong to the Black Sea fleet. This means that there are estimates between 20, 30, the Russian Black Sea fleet ships are outside the Black Sea now. They are not able to bring it back, which is important because as the war extends and continues, a number of Russian ships already sunk in the Black Sea by the Ukrainian forces, top of which was Moscow. Now the Russian Black Sea fleet becoming obsolete, actually. They are losing power and losing domination of the Black Sea, and they are not able to replenish it, which is very important. The second aspect is this also prevents Russia to logistically support its Syrian forces from the Black Sea, which they had been doing, which is quite important. Secondly, Turkey has been providing 67% of the NATO intelligence in the Black Sea. And sharing this, more importantly, sharing this intelligence, both aerial intelligence and also surface intelligence, sharing this intelligence with Ukraine since the Crimean occupation, not since this war, but since 2014, Turkey has been sharing this, what is called situational awareness intelligence in the Black Sea with Ukraine and with NATO countries, which is also, I think, important. And apart from this, of course, there are so much, the UAVs, everybody keep talking about that Turkey gave to Ukraine or whatnot. But more important, I think UAVs were quite important at the first stages of the war and for the psychological and perspective. Turkey has been providing guided multiple rocket launchers, different mine-resistant, ambush-protected personal carriers, armored vehicles, ammunition, millions of ammunitions, mortars, ground-based electronic warfare equipment. You know, these are the things that never get reported in the news. Actually, we collected them from the newspapers and open intelligence, but they are not being discussed publicly. So in a sense, I think Turkey is playing an important role in supporting Ukraine here, not being a neutral, apart from, of course, not contributing to the sanctions in Russia. Looking to the future, just one word and I'll finish here. In the Caucasus, after the war between the recent Nagorno-Karabakh war, the second war, Turkey is, I think, in a position of wait and see. Russia is obviously distracted because of the war in Ukraine and has already shown signs of, I wouldn't like to say a weakness, but at least out of focus in the Caucasus. And Azerbaijan has been testing this, obviously, on the ground. And Turkey is looking to seeing how much Russia will continue to be influential or withdrawing from the Caucasus or opening up a new place for influence for Turkey or not. But obviously, Turkey would not challenge directly Russia without seeing its the next step or the step after. Secondly, the talks with Armenia is quite important. It could be potentially game-changing movement if Turkey and Armenia normalize their relationship for the region. For Turkey, economically, this is not that much important. Sometimes this is being asked, but for political and psychological reasons and for strategic reasons, it would be quite important for the Caucasus. But let me emphasize, this will depend on Armenia-Azerbaijan relationship. More than anybody else in Turkish political scene, Erdoğan has connected Turkish-Armenia rapprochement with Armenia-Azerbaijan negotiations and deals and etc. So he's not going to change that. And that's why Turkey has been taking it quite slowly in this negotiations and talks. And it goes it goes in parallel. In the Black Sea, looking to the future, I think Turkey will continue as it is, but there will be more pressures because, as I know, and many of you might already know, that there are attempts to create new policies both for NATO and the European Union. If NATO comes up with an idea of new Black Sea policy, then Turkey has to be part of it. And that might create more complications in the region for Turkish foreign policy or current Turkish foreign policy. EU is, on the other hand, is not seen from Turkey as a competing actor or existentially important actor, both in the Black Sea and in the Caucasus. Actually, they could have played more role, but obviously for their internal reasons, they are not able to do so. So if you like, I can stop here and then we can continue with discussions later on.
Thank you very much, Professor Aydin. That was really very illuminating. And it sounds to me like what you're saying is very interesting, this concept of cooperative competition that you're talking about, because it's very much jives with like how I see the relationship, and that like it feels like there's there are differences, and Russia is in competition with Turkey in the region, but there are clear red lines, there are clear rules, and there are agreed rules to the game. And that's quite ironic in a way, given the whole problem with Russia is a country that's a revisionist power, effectively, that doesn't believe in rules to the game. You know, it's interesting that Turkey has been successful in getting Russia to at least implicitly agree to rules within their bilateral relationship, even when there is competition between the two countries, where everywhere else has failed with that approach considerably. And that's an interesting. It's very interesting when you look at how Turkey has managed to do that. I think it goes back quite far in time, this sort of relationship. If you think back to 2008 and the war in Georgia, Russian troops took the port of Poti on the Black Sea, but they didn't take Batumi. And part of the reason is there was a US warship in Batumi at the time. But another part of the reason, potentially, is Batumi is much more key to Turkish interests. And, you know, that was seen, perhaps, I'm speculating here, is even at that earlier stage in history, to be a Turkish red line Russia would rather not cross. So that it seems like that there is a kind of line, as you say, in the relationship, which is not, it's sort of a kind of rules-based game, which is interestingly different from how Russia interacts with its other neighbors, which is basically a rule-free zone. But anyway, on that kind of note, I'd like to pass on to our next speaker, who is Marina, and I'll let you go from there. So, Marina, what do you say to that to this, and how does Mustafa's points about Turkey's role in the region jive with how you see it as a Ukrainian based in London?
Thank you very much, and thanks to the colleagues from Democratic Security Institute for having me here today at this discussion and providing me with this opportunity to try to unwrap the complexity of Turkey's position in the Black Sea. I'll focus mainly on Russia-Turkey-Ukraine relationship and this complicated and compartmentalized relationship, since this is where my expertise can be most helpful. And I think Mustafa has really laid a good background describing how we all Turkey experts and Turkey watchers before the elections were, speculating and wondering how the situation will evolve and what could happen if the opposition comes to power. And actually, we've heard the opposition signaling that the foreign policy will change seriously, qualitatively, that there will be, more of Western leaning, trying to mend the fence with the West, etc. But on Russia, let me stress it from the very beginning. I think it's very important. There seems to be a consensus in Turkish society that Russia is a very important partner, strategic partner for Turkey. And this consensus is shared by the opposition as well. We've seen the manifesto they prepared and the foreign policy part of it, saying that they will try, if they come to power, to develop constructive and friendly relationship with Russia. And of course, we've noticed that just before the elections, Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu, he tweeted openly accusing Kremlin of meddling into the election, of interfering in the Turkish elections. and literally saying to Kremlin to keep their hands off Turkey, but at the same time saying that we want to have friendly, constructive relationship with Russia. So had the opposition won, I mean, I think myself, and many other colleagues were thinking that we wouldn't have seen much of dramatic change on Russia. So we have Erdogan re-elected. That is why I think that we are to see the continuity here. So both to describe the complexity, of this relationship, let me say that formally, both Russia and Ukraine are Turkey's strategic partners. What Turkey is doing is trying to balance the relationship between both of them. And of course, I think it's important to say, and I think it was described already, that how Turkey, I mean, it may not be, or it is surely not very happy about how Russia destroys the status quo in the Black Sea by its war in Ukraine. So of course Turkey cannot be, happy with those developments. But this stability, as Mustafa said, and having this managed relationship with Turkey, not spiraling, with Russia, not spiraling out of the control. So this kind of damage control that they are very preoccupied with, both Russia and Turkey. So this has been an underlying feature of this relationship. So that's why Turkey, I think it's fair to say, chose to adapt to emerging realities, at the same time opting to support Ukraine to the extent that it deems necessary. So at the same time, I think it's interesting, just a footnote, since I'm talking about the elections, to stress how on Kremlin's side, I mean, there were Kremlin was hopeful that Erdogan is re-elected. And we understand why, because Turkey has been a predictable partner under Erdogan's rule for Russia. So, of course, they hope that Erdogan stays in power. And I think we've seen how Russia was supporting Erdogan and injecting Turkey with finances, which Turkey, was in dire need of because of its, the economic situation it is currently in. So we've seen how Russia's Rosatom company was wiring, $10 billion into its subsidiary in Turkey, or we've seen Russia deferring the payment of the gas bill from this year till 2024. So trying to help Erdogan, let's say, alleviate this economic crisis and economic situation. So yes, I agree that the relationship between Russia and Turkey has both of competition and of cooperation. That's why we really call this relationship, cooperative rivalry or competitive cooperation. And yeah, it's sometimes surprising how both of them manage to compartmentalize this relationship. And I think, again, Mustafa described it well, how they compete in one theaters and they converge somewhere else, on other issues. So at the same time, this strategic partnership between Russia and Turkey has been very multidimensional. They have lots of shared interests, ranging from economy to energy, tourism. So again, I think it has been noteworthy, the reasoning that Turkey made about non-joining the sanctions, that it was not consulted about sanctions, that it doesn't support sanctions which are not backed by the UN or provide, so basically finding the rationale of not joining the anti-Russian sanctions by the West, and trying to not only that, but also becoming a safe haven for Russian illicit finances. So this is one part of the story again, and again, the strategic outlook of both regimes has been very sometimes very convergent in terms of this opposition to Western-led multilateral institutions, fixation with the independent foreign policy. When Putin was congratulating Erdogan with the re-election, he said that he personally commends him for conducting independent foreign policy. Here is a clear allusion to the fact that Turkey has a very, specific policy vis-a-vis West and Russia. And of course, this personal affinity between both Erdogan and Putin has been also very widely discussed, this sort of what we call authoritarian trust. But again, we are aware how Turkey was doing certain foreign policy actions that Russia could consider, or definitely considered, as a dangerous brinkmanship, as something that, and was absolutely unhappy with. And of course, Turkey's relationship with Ukraine is one of those serious indicators how Turkey tried to balance this relationship, not to be, not to look pro-Russian. I think, important note here is that when I'm asked about is Turkey pro-Russian or pro-Ukrainian, I think it's very difficult to put some label there, because I think its foreign policy here is very much dictated at the moment by Erdogan's transactional vision of foreign policy. So it's more sort of transactional approach and preoccupation with the Turkey's grandeur, grand status, rather than, so it's not pro-Russian or pro-Ukrainian. It should be, I think characterized in different in different wording. And of course, we may be wondering about how sustainable this balancing act is. So we've been talking about this since 2014, because this is, again, was the time when Turkey had to sort of, refine its position on Russia and Ukraine. This is when the war actually started, when Crimea was annexed. Turkey didn't recognize annexation of Crimea. It's always supported the territorial integrity of Ukraine. Mustafa also described, this flourishing military defense cooperation between Ukraine and Turkey. Just recently, Turkey built the first corvette for Ukrainian Navy, and many others. So Bayraktars and many other, some military assistance as well. So we've seen here, support. At the same time, let me just say, where I think, which was very much appreciated by Kiev, including the mediation part. I will talk about mediation part now. But before, let me say where Kiev and Ankara found themselves on different pages. I think in terms of how they see the war or the re-invasion since February last year, how the official discourses define what is happening actually in Ukraine, what Russia is doing in Ukraine. Because for Ukraine and majority of its allies, this is an unprovoked act of aggression that Russia committed against Ukraine. If you follow Turkey's discourse closely, you would hear a bit of different nuances and details describing this, why it's happening, with many saying that actually Russia has been provoked by the West. It's West who encroached on Russia's legitimate interest in its neighborhood, in its, in this post-Soviet backyard. And it was natural, or only natural, to expect Russia to sort of be provoked and strike back, let's say, and conduct sort of actions that would preclude Ukraine's joining NATO, etc., etc. So again, speaking about peace, because this is one of the biggest issues at the moment now, Turkey being a mediator, pushing for peace. I think we also have different readings how Ukraine and Turkey define peace. For Ukraine, the formula is clear. It's, just, lasting, and comprehensive peace. So this is the official formula. Turkey's preoccupation is that of there should be negotiated settlement as soon as possible, because one of the arguments is that because there is a loss of, innocent lives of civilians in Ukraine, so that it's very important to stop fighting now. So, which is, of course, I mean, it's only natural to say that this is important, but I think again, these are different. Focuses here how they see the future, of the peace, what needs to be done for that. And finally, my last remaining minutes, let me talk about Turkey's very crucial and instrumental role as a mediator, which it played not only since February last year, but actually since 2014, probably, which was not so much, under radar, but Turkey did help Ukraine to free its prisoners. So there was a Turkey-mediated exchange of prisoners. It was vocal about the Crimean Tatars' human rights violations, and so and certainly now we see, Turkey playing even more active role. Let me again just bring in this discussion just the most recent example of what Turkey can do as a mediator and where there are objective limitations of what it can do. So after the explosion on Nova Kakhovka Dam, and this was actually the first telephone calls that President Erdogan made, the first foreign policy contacts, he called to Zelensky and to Putin, saying that he offers to create an international investigation group to look into the causes of this explosion, with the participation of Ukrainian, Russian, and other specialists. In the readout of Zelensky's office of this very conversation with Erdogan, there was no mention of Erdogan's offer, and there was just a clear wording that this was an act of aggression by Russia, and basically hinting that we don't need an investigative mechanism with participating of Russian experts on the ground to actually state that this was an act of war by Russia. At the same time, Kremlin did not react to this officially. I didn't see this reaction to Turkey's proposal either. So there are clearly limitations. I brought this example as an illustration what Turkey can do. And of course, the peak of Turkey's success as a mediator has been the very well-known Black Sea Grain Initiative, or Grain Deal, which was portrayed quite deservedly and fairly as, Turkey being the architect of this deal as a result of Turkey's proactive diplomacy. This is, I think, is very true. What remains, though, less known is that how limited this deal is, or that it does not operate as it was designed or thought of because of Russia's, reaction, and because basically, this has been a very important relief measure, but in grand terms, it's just a palliative measure, for a bit, because until there is a full resumption of free commercial navigation in the Black Sea, we cannot talk about really, that this crisis is over. So far, it's working in a very limited mode, with Russia conducting lots of intrusive checks in the straits of the vessels which are carrying the outbound, inbound vessels which are to carry the Ukrainian grain from Odessa and several other ports. So we've seen that Russia has already, has violated the already limited mode of agreement, and I think neither Turkey nor, for that matter, any other actor seems to be in a position, to really, to have some leverage on Russia's position. or not to make it walk away from it. So it doesn't walk away from, not because it's an act of benevolence, but mainly, yeah, because it also favors its own, Russian interest. So talking about mediation, I think it's very important how important this instrumental role of Turkey has been. But at the same time, we need to be aware that it's very unlikely that Turkey will be somebody who will help Russia and Ukraine to seal the peace deal in the foreseeable near-term future. So I don't see this happening, and Turkey remain an important mediator, but on a less strategic level. So it not about it won't be about the peace, I think. And the last point I'll make here is that I think also Mustafa mentioned it, and we could discuss this further, how Turkey's position might be changing in future. What might prompt this change? We think a lot, wonder whether Turkey might try to fill in the niche that is being emptied at the moment, with Russia being bogged down in Ukraine. Having its hands tied, redeploying the forces from the Georgian occupied areas of Abkhazia and South Ossetia. So whether this would invite a more assertive Turkish position. So this remains to be seen, but I think this is very interesting to see, that how this condominium or this balance of power that both parties pursue here in the Black Sea might actually change with, I wouldn't say Russia's decline, because I think this is too strong a wording, to talk about Russia's decline. Russia still maintains very important spoiler abilities in the region. But with Russia's, let's say, a sort of weakening posture, gradually weakening posture, what could be the Turkey's response? I think this could be also thought about. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marina. That was really very illuminating and very, very interesting from you. I mean, I think what you're saying really makes me think is just how wide-ranging the Turkey-Russia relationship is, and how much it's a relationship of contrasts, like complete opposites. You have everything along the spectrum of relations. So on the one hand, Erdoğan is Putin's favorite in Turkey in some ways. As you said, Russia has actually put down financial resources to support Erdoğan in the elections by deferring the gas bill and the Rosatom the thing that you were talking about. So I think all of this stuff, on the one hand, Erdoğan being Putin's guy in some ways in Turkey. But on the other hand, Erdoğan is the guy who shot down, as Mustafa said earlier, he's the only NATO leader to be in charge of a country that's shot down a Russian aircraft since the Second World War. And Erdoğan is also Russia's main competitor in the Black Sea region. So you have this huge contrast on the one hand between this authoritarian personal affinity on the one hand, and compartmentalized cooperation. On the other hand, outright confrontation sometimes, which reached its peak, I guess, during the shooting down of that aircraft, but also at other times. And also everything in between. So including Turkey's role now as a mediator between Russia and Ukraine, which sometimes is very, very effective, and sometimes gets completely ignored. So even on that, it's a relationship of contrast. So even within Turkey's role as a mediator, from what you're saying, it sounds like Turkey is simultaneously very, very effective and important. But sometimes when Russia and Ukraine, when Turkey's actions doesn't match the interests of the two parties, they can completely be ignored as well at the same time. So it's really a relationship that has everything along the spectrum happening to it, which makes it one of the most fascinating countries to look at during this conflict. And on that note, I'll pass on to our third speaker, who has a very different perspective, being from Armenia. And it's always very interesting to hear an Armenian perspective on Turkey. And there are no Armenian perspectives, but I'd like to hear more than that of Arek. So go ahead, Arek. How does this all look like from Yerevan?
First of all, thank you, Alexander, for inviting me, and thank you for organizing this event. And it was really interesting so far to hear my colleagues. It has been mentioned more than once already today that things have changed after the 44 days war between Armenia and Turkey, and that there is a chance of normalization between Armenia and Turkey. In my opinion, the biggest thing that have changed after the Second Karabakh War is let us call it the baggage of thoughts of Armenia on this matter and about Turkey. Now, this is the biggest thing that have changed so far. Nothing else have really significantly changed. So in my speech, I will speak about two major issues. First is this: what did change in this package of thoughts of Armenia about Turkey and about Armenian-Turkey relations, and the second, the process itself, the process of normalization itself. Where are we and how far have we gone? So the very first thing is that classically in Armenia there were two school of thoughts about how should we build our relations with Turkey. First school of thought was historically less active and less popular. It was, we have to build our relation with Turkey because it is our neighbor country. In fact, it is the strongest in our in the list of our neighbors, and it has the closest border to our capital, etc., etc. So immediate and neighboring relations, let's say. Second school of thought, which was more popular and always, let's say, winning, was, well, we have allies, we have, let's say, a country we can hide behind of, which was during the last decades, Russia, prior to that, maybe France or something else. So we don't really need to talk to the Turks. If they don't want, then we don't need it either. Now, these have changed after the 44 days war, because another social construct in Armenia was that Turkey is not really in our region. Turkey is not in South Caucasus. South Caucasus is the territory of the Russian influence, and the Russians will never let Turks in, let's say. And those two constructs, they have eradicated together, let's say, after the 44 days war. And with it, they brought the clear understanding and the clear need of conversation and the restart, let's say, of relations with Turkey. Another thought that is being more and more cultivated and more actively spoken in Armenia is that the biggest reason for the catastrophes and the tragedies in our history is that we were not able to keep a balance between Russians and the Turks. Now, in order to solve this and never to come back to this, we have to learn to keep the balance between the Turkey and Russia, kind of like Georgians do. Now, Georgians are not also a shining example of keeping the balance, but on the opposite, let's say, direction. But nonetheless, the Georgia is historically doing a bit better than Armenia. So the third, let's say, package is that we have to keep the balance between the Russia and the Turkey, and we can't be an instrument or, let's say, a weapon of Russia against Turkey, because usually it always ends dramatically for the instrument or for the weapon, let's say. Now, next thing is that but there was always this idea that it is possible to negotiate or to build up relations with Turkey regardless of Azerbaijan. And this was the main problem with the Zurich protocols, where then President of Armenia have tried to establish the relationship with Turkey and to try to normalize the relationship with Turkey and take into the scopes the problem of Karabakh and the opposition from Azerbaijan. Now that failed, that wasn't successful. And now the situation has changed. So now I would like to speak a little bit about the normalization process. You know, there is this saying of Russian Prime Minister Chernomyrdin, who once said, "We don't really have a lot of achievements, but at least we have a government." So here we don't really have a lot of achievements in the normalization process, but at least we have the normalization process itself. So we have the appointees of the governments who are talking to each other, as much as I understand, on a weekly to daily basis via phone, and sometimes they're meeting. There were some agreements to open the air cargo from Istanbul to Yerevan, and there was also and it worked for a period of time until the Turkish government shut it down after there was a statue opened in Yerevan. Another agreement was that the border between Armenia and Turkey will be open starting from the touristic season for the third country citizens and for the barriers of the diplomatic passports. But I don't know in which country the touristic season opens later than mid or end June, but definitely that's not the case with Armenia and Turkey. Nonetheless, the border is still shut, even for the barriers of the diplomatic passports or the citizens of the third countries. So this brings us to the problems with the current normalization process. The very first problem is the unsustainability. We have felt this here in Yerevan, that even the achievements that we have had so far, namely the air cargo from Istanbul to Yerevan, could be blocked or could be resettled in a matter of hours. As a fact, this happened when there was a plane in the Turkish air zone when the air corridor was shut, let's say. So the first problem is the unsustainability. Second problem is the ineffective implementation. We have seen that there were some ambitious agendas, that there have been some negotiations and even agreements, but those agreements failed to face the situation on the ground, let's say. So the process itself is not very much effective. Third is, of course, the unbalanced position of Turkey on a series of events. Namely, of course, it's first of all, it's the Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict, and it's not only inside of Karabakh but also on the other parts of the Armenian-Azerbaijani border. Every single time when there is a clash between Armenia and Azerbaijan on a different parts of the border, that may be even closer to Yerevan than to the other parts of Azerbaijan, which is the village of Yeras. We always see a very one-sided declarations from Turkey, namely supporting Azerbaijan and blaming Armenia and etc. So that's the third biggest problem, the unbalanced policy. And the last but not least, lack of temp, let's say. Every single time, whenever Yerevan tries to escalate the process, whenever Yerevan tries to bring additional agendas and to bring additional topics to the conversation, usually the Turkish government tries to slow it down, tries to stop it. And this was particularly, this is something particularly regarding the late foreign minister of Turkey, the previous one. So if we could say which institution was the one that was torpedoing or slowing down the process, that was definitely the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Turkey, namely the minister. Now, all those problems, let's say, they are not the issue themselves. These are the symptoms of the issue. I couldn't possibly agree more with Professor Aydin about the sort of a approach of the Turkish government, and namely the president, that the normalization with Armenia have to go simultaneously with the normalization of Armenian-Azerbaijani relations. We here in Armenia call this sort of a coalition of normalization, anti-Armenian coalition of normalization. And yes, it is a fact that we're trying to work with it, but I would question whether this policy is the most effective one if Turkey really wants to see a normalization of Armenia and Azerbaijan and to see a more, active role of itself in this normalization. Because when you're playing always one-sided, you don't really have an effective tools or instruments to work with this normalization process, let's say. And this is one of the reasons that the elections, during the elections, the most favorable candidate for the Armenia was Kılıçdaroğlu, not Erdoğan, because we had the high hopes that Kılıçdaroğlu wouldn't be in a cell, let's say, to which Erdoğan had put in himself by connecting Armenian-Turkish normalization to the Armenian-Azerbaijani normalization to this level. Second is that we have seen this during the Zurich protocols in 2008, 2009 is that Azerbaijan is always ready to give a better price to Turkey than Armenia is possibly capable of. So whenever there is a real momentum and whenever there is a real possibility of the normalization between Armenia and Turkey, Azerbaijan always gives a better price. Namely, that can be a better prices for gas, constructing something in Turkey, for example, oil factory somewhere in the western parts of Turkey, or building up a new gas pipeline with Turkey. So something much more interesting for Turkey, just to have the border itself shut. So that's the third possible reason of the problems I have named. Fourth is that there's this saying, if I'm not wrong, this is from Descartes, who says the process itself is everything, the result is nothing. So there is also an idea that Turkey is more interested in the process itself because it is something that Turkey can sell on its Western partners, because there are countries who are very much interested in the Armenian-Turkish normalization, namely the United States of America. But then there is never the result was, let's say, Turkey was never result-oriented, but more of a process-oriented in this negotiation process. To keep it simple, after the 44 days war, Armenia have felt a critical need of conversation and negotiations with Turkey. And here's something interesting, not only because of the threat from Turkey and from Azerbaijan and because of the intimidation it have felt, but also because of Russia. I would like to read something. So IREI in 2023 have passed a social poll in Armenia regarding many issues, but one of them is a very interesting one, and this is a tectonic change in Armenia. So the last time it was done in 2018, 87% of the Armenian population named current state of relationship between Armenia and Russia as positive, and only 11% called it something negative. Now, the one done in 2023, in March 2023, this is something dramatic. So 49% called it a negative, and just 50 called it positive. 1% refused to answer. So never Russia was this unpopular in Armenia, and never so many people anticipating Russia as a threat for Armenia. So in both cases, whether Turkey is the threat or Russia is the threat for the for the Republic of Armenia, in both cases the most sustainable and the most logical solution for Armenia is to start the conversation for Turkey. So now we have the picture when one of the sides is clearly very much interested in the conversation and the negotiations, and on the other side, Turkey is either connecting these negotiations with Azerbaijan, but there's also another possibility here, and I may be called a person who is into conspiracy theories and stuff, but we have some data under this, that there is an agreement between Russia and Turkey, let's say, about the future of the South Caucasus. I wouldn't call it, shaping the borders and stuff like that, but some mutual understanding of how the map and the future and the political segregation, let's say, of the South Caucasus should look like. And in this, Turkey accepts the role of Russia in Armenia. And for Russia, the shut Armenian-Turkish border and the tense Armenian-Turkish relations is one of the most important anchors of influence, not only in Armenia, but also in South Caucasus. If we put it very simple, the main Russian narrative in Armenia for ages, if not for dozens of years, was, if we leave, Turks are going to attack and they're going to destroy you. Now, if we have normal relations with Turkey, if we have normalization process, this main, let's say, anchor of the Russian influence in Armenia is gone, and that's something that's something Russia is clearly not interested in. To conclude it, clearly, we have a historical momentum because, as I mentioned, Armenia right now is very much interested in the normalization process with Turkey. But unfortunately, and simultaneously, we have a stagnation in the process. All the achievements that we already have are either not working or didn't even start to work. And on the other hand, if we look to the tempo of the meeting between the special representatives, it's only going lower and lower. So there is a stagnation. Hopefully, things will change after the electoral process in Turkey ended.
Thank you very much, Arik. That was great. It's very interesting, actually, what you say, and it's quite interesting to kind of compare the Turkey Armenia relationship with Turkey-Russia relationship. So the Turkey-Russia relationship, both Mustafa and Marina were both talking about how it was a relationship of compartmentalization, that they can't compartmentalize areas of cooperation from areas of confrontation and rivalry. Whereas the Armenia-Turkey relationship is almost the opposite. It's a complete failure of compartmentalization, where consistently the nascent relationship, bilateral relationship in Turkey and Armenia, is undermined by the presence of Azerbaijan and the fact that Turkey's insistence historically that all problems with Azerbaijan need to be solved before the relationship can improve between Turkey and Armenia. So there's been a complete failure to compartmentalize the Nagorno-Karabakh related issues from wider bilateral relations between the two countries, which is interesting because obviously Turkey is a common factor between the two. And then in one dimension, it's very into compartmentalization and saying we agree to disagree on some things but cooperate on others. But with Armenia, it's a very principled across the board. We're not going to talk to you about phytosanitary regulations, even if we can't, if we don't solve the problems in Karabakh, right? So it's interesting to see the contrast and approach there. So yeah, and thanks for that. And on this, we've actually spent quite a long time. So we've got a sort of limited amount of time, but we would it's now time for question and answers. So if you would like to ask a question of any or all of our speakers, you can do one of two things. You can either raise your hand, and we will open the microphone for you to ask a question, or you can put it in the chat, one or the other. So would anyone like to ask a question of our speakers on any of the topics that we've discussed today? So you can either raise your hand or put it in the chat if you prefer, and I will read it out when it gets there. Yes, so we have a question from Medea. So I'm not in charge of the microphones. Can someone?
Yeah, you hear me?
Okay, we can hear you. Yeah. So okay. Medea, ask your question.
Yes, hello, and thank you very much for very interesting talks. Yeah, sitting in Tbilisi and listening to all of this is a bit, well, frustrating, but well, I'm still find it a bit difficult to grasp Turkish approach to Russia. You mentioned that, well, Marina and Mustafa also mentioned that there is, on the one hand, Turkey is providing armament to Ukraine, and, has been very active during the war. At the same time, though, not doing much, or even on the contrary, maybe supporting in, getting away with the sanctions, and in a way supporting economically as well, right? In the sake of stability. In the region, for the sake of stability. So then my question is, like, what is really the stability for Turkey while you have in the region, while you have a war ongoing in Ukraine, while you have Russian forces stationed both in Georgia, Armenia, now in Azerbaijan as well, which was not the case before. Then there is this escalation between Azerbaijan and Iran relations. I mean, so what is the stability in Turkish understanding, that there is no Turkish-Russian war, or there is more? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Medea. Very good question. Yeah, you're right. What is the stability? We've got war everywhere. War in Karabakh, war in Ukraine. What stability? What are we talking about here? Very good question. Thank you. Arek's got his hand up. Does that mean you want to go first? You've got your hand up, so
that means I have a question.
Oh, you have a question as well. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. Then maybe we'll. Do you want to ask a question as well as answering the question, and then we can combine them, and you can go first, and then the other two speakers can also answer your question and answer Medea's question.
I'll take my turn. I will still wait.
Okay, you'll wait. Okay, so maybe Mustafa, if you would like to go first, then answer Medea's question. What stability?
Yeah. I was getting ready to say no war with Russia for Turkey, but Medea already said that. Look, I mean, Turkey has been very experienced in playing this game with Russia like centuries now. It's not something very new. Although Turkey watchers, Western Turkey watchers, and people who come to analyze Turkey in recent years think that this is something happening for the first time. It's not. It has been happening like almost 200 years now. And this is a way that Turkey found it over the years, over the decades and centuries, to survive in this neighborhood without actually fighting it out with Russia. And now it seems that sort of a modus operandi has developed, which also benefits Turkey in different areas. When you are a country like Turkey, touching different geographies and having sometimes or most of the times contradictory interests, actually, in itself, you have to have a very complicated foreign policy, and I would admit that not based on ideals or principles. Former Foreign Minister Davutoğlu was very keen on talking about importance of ideals and principles in foreign policy, but he was not very successful as foreign minister in Turkey, because if you are in this neighborhood, where you have to balance your interests in the Mediterranean with those of interest in the Middle East, and also with the Caucasus, also in the Black Sea, also in the Balkans and everything, you cannot be anything but realist and pragmatist only for yourself. This is a message, and this is a lesson that Turkey learned over the centuries. It's not something new. As far as the relations with Russia is concerned, if you are in Turkey and in Ankara, you look from a longer perspective, where you had Russia from Bulgaria to Armenia, like huge, colossal Russia with nuclear power threatening you about 50 years. When that threat disappears, you become very happy, first of all. Right? Huge threat disappeared. Then you also find out that there are now independent countries in the region where Turkey could play a role, which is also much more improvement than previous era. And also, furthermore, you also find out that there are countries where Turkey could take upper hand against this competition with Russia. Wow, that's even much better, right? So you don't want to create an environment where this kind of a balance, equilibrium. When I say balance, I don't mean that equality, but sort of a balance of power, which you derive benefits. You don't want that to disturb this kind of balance of power. And I think that's what stability for Turkey means, or at least that's what I meant when I say stability. There is a balance, and balance sometimes benefits Turkey, sometimes not benefits Turkey. But when you look from Turkey, whenever this balance is unbalanced, whenever this balance is disturbed, Russia makes a move, which creates another balance, which is more negative for Turkey than previously. Right? We had a kind of a balance of power, let's say in 2007, where Turkey had some influence in the Caucasus and where Turkey had quite a much influence in the Black Sea. Then come 2008 and war with Georgia and inability of United States and Western countries to intervene. And you have a new balance of power, which is worse than the previous one. Then it continues and something happens and Russia then starts occupying Crimea. And again, the Western powers are unable to do anything, despite all the promises, all the bravado and everything. Then you have a new balance of power, which is worse, even worse than the previous one. So every time you jump onto this wagon of kind of anti-Russian policies or whatever, a new kind of a reaction comes from Russia and creates a new balance of power, which is worse than the previous one. So I think in that sense, Turkey decided to move back to look only for its own interests and to try to create a sort of balance which could be more long-term and less amenable to change. Because every time it changes, it looks like it's going worse than the previous one. I hope I make a sense here.
Thank you very much. Again, yeah, it's probably quite depressing from a Georgian perspective, because I think from a Georgian perspective, cooperation between Turkey and Russia and modus operandi, those words don't go down very well in Tbilisi. But yeah, it's good to take it how it is, you know. So Marina, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, thank you very much, Medea, for your question. When you ask the question about how Turkey manages, you know, how this coexists, Turkey's quest for stability, its preoccupation with the stability, with at the same time its policy, which in certain aspects enables actually Russia, strengthens Russia. I think you express the concern that many Turkey experts have, how this actually works. And there are, I see clearly two extreme poles here. On one extreme, we hear the experts arguing, and many in Turkey arguing, that this is actually beneficial. This brings dividends not only to Turkey, but to the West, arguably as well, because without this Turkey's position, West would not have any intermediary to talk to Russia. The grain deal wouldn't be possible, etc., etc. So on this pole, we have really the arguments for this position. On the other extreme, like this other opposite pole, is the arguments that talk about Turkey as a NATO member actually harming itself, you know, doing undermining its own defense and deterrence posture vis-a-vis Russia. And where I find myself on all this spectrum, I think I tend to, you know, to incline more to the second. And I think that really Turkey's defense and security posture can be compromised if this this dependence on Russia is not tackled very seriously and profoundly. So we've discussed this idea of Turkey's strategic autonomy. And my question is, you know, usually how this complements or coexists with Turkey actually deepening ties with Russia, you know, or not looking into some issues which are, where it could try to become less dependent. Many would argue now that with Russia's decline, or weakening posture, however we call it, this asymmetry is correcting itself to Turkey's favor. You know, that Turkey, before it was Russia as like a stronger hand in this alliance, while Turkey, you know, in many cases, you know, didn't want, you know, some additional irritants in this relationship. And with Russia being in this situation as it is because of the war in Ukraine, Turkey kind of gets an upper hand. So I've heard an argument like that. But at the same time, I think that we are still to see some measures which would actually bring Turkey's idea of Turkey's strategic autonomy into fruition, because while distancing itself from the West, or, you know, obstructing, Sweden's accession to NATO, you know, and saying that this is Turkey's independence and strategic autonomy, at the same time not being as apprehensive to Russia's threat as we would expect a NATO member to be. You know, this is also kind of, you know, a very strange puzzle for me, and conundrum that Turkey faces at the moment. I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Marina. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely seen from here in Tbilisi. It's always felt that Turkey has a bit of a kind of feels like it could be doing more. It's stronger than it thinks it is in some ways. So Mustafa's point was that every time the balance of power changes, it's for the worse for Turkey. And I think the response to that perhaps would be, well, that's because if Turkey was more active and willing to use its influence, maybe it would not be so much that way. But it's a matter of controversy for sure. So Mustafa has his hand raised. I need to first go to Arik because he needs to quickly respond, but he also had a question. But we've officially kind of run out of time, more or less. So if we could be quick and respond to that, and also give your question presumably to the other two, and then maybe we can quickly wrap up from there.
Sure.
So Arik, you go first.
Regarding the question of Medea, I would separate two answers there. First, in my opinion, the conflicts and instability in the international relations are the very much nature of the international relations, and it is much more of a unnatural to the international relations. The peace is more unnatural to the international relations rather than the conflicts and the instability. During the whole history of the mankind, there was only one period of time, the bipolar world and then the unipolar world, when we had some level of stability and of peace. But that phase was the unnatural one towards the international relations. So my point is, we're going to see more and more conflicts because there are more and more centers of powers like China, India, EU, USA, Russia, and more. So we're going to live in a much more tense and a conflictly rich world, let's say. And regarding the Turkey's position towards Russia-Ukrainian conflict, I would very much, in my opinion, it's very close to the China's position. It is to get as much from the situation as it is possible, to work with the post sides, to work with all other sides, and to gain as much positive from the situation for the country as it is possible. And I would like to give two questions to Professor Aydin. First, Professor, what do you think is the Russia's role and the Russia's true position on the Armenia-Turkish normalization process? Why do I ask it this way? Because the Russian MFA was very clear that they very much supported, that they are ready to host it, etc., etc. But in my opinion, that's not the case. So I would like to hear your opinion. And the second question would be, why do you think the Mehri corridor, or as Azerbaijan puts it, the Zangezur corridor, in a meaning of corridor, is important for Turkey? Why to use the word of corridor? Because lately we've seen President Erdoğan doing that too.
Okay, thanks, Arik. I'll let Mustafa respond to those briefly because we're a couple of minutes over time already, and then I'll give Marina a quick chance to come back as well if there is anything, and then we'll finish from there, I think.
Thank you. I just wanted to add something to previous question, maybe highlight something else. You have to, if you are a mid-sized country, especially in a very strategic position between regions, you have to balance different interests and different priorities. And it's not always the perfect world. You normally don't end up in your perfect preferences. In an ideal world, Turkey would have much preferred to have huge influence, economic, political influence in the Caucasus, no Russian military in the Caucasus at all. And all the Western Caucasian countries are linked to the Europe and West. In the Black Sea, having a connection with especially creating a condominium with Ukraine against Russia, these would have been much preferred. But we are not there because there are other interests and other threats. Marina was talking about the threat perceptions. It's very interesting. I do public surveys in Turkey also. And when I ask Turkish people about the threat perceptions, who does threaten Turkey, the United States is always the number one for years. Right? The Russia is, since the end of the Cold War, but especially in recent years, is down in the middle of the huge list, like maybe in the 10th space or something. So there is not really expectation in Turkish strategic thinking that Russia might attack Turkey. Of course, being a NATO member makes a huge difference here, right? Whatever Turkey does and whatever kind of Turkey has policies, Turkey is a NATO member. So we do not expect Russia to attack a NATO member. I said in a number of places, if Ukraine was a NATO member, this war would not have happened, obviously. Even though Russia uses the argumentation that Ukraine wanted to NATO member and threatening, etc. The fact is that if Ukraine was a NATO member, this war would not have happened. So there is no particular threat perception from Russia. In that sense, the real threat perception, that's why I mentioned this survival issue in Syria and etc. The number one threat perception in Turkey, and therefore the number one issue in its foreign policy, is how to balance United States in Syria with its relationship with the Kurds. And the Russians are very useful for that. That's as simple as that. So if Russians ask something in return, for example, then the government will be very amenable to accept that. Looking to the Russian role in Armenia-Turkey normalization, I think Russians ultimately know that if Armenia-Azerbaijan problem is solved, and if there is a normalization between Turkey and Armenia, then Armenia is going to be Western-leaning country as soon as possible. And this was the reality in 1991, and I think it's the reality today. However, Russia also wants to manage the situation, because if Russia totally opposes any kind of a movement and change and normalization in Turkish-Armenian relations, then this invites United States and the European countries to start proposing their own solutions for Turkish-Armenian normalization. And it brings Europe and it brings United States into the picture. But when Russia supports this normalization and even suggests this normalization, then the other countries is out of the region, and it's between Russia, Armenia, and Turkey and Armenia. And I think that in a very cynical way, this is kind of Russian way of controlling the developments between Turkey and Armenia. Zangezur, I think that's, first of all, it's more important to Azerbaijan than Turkey, obviously, because Azerbaijan wants this connection with Nahchivan and etc. For Turkey, its importance would be to create a direct connection to Central Asia without going through Iran or very roundabout way of Georgia. And that would be, economically, it would be quite important. I think psychologically also, nobody talks about this kind of issues, but I think it psychologically would be important for Turkey to have this direct connection between so-called Turkic states, right? That's why Turkey, I think Erdoğan started talking about it. But of course, the real starter of that discussion is Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan wants it. and puts a premium, I think, for that corridor in the negotiations.
Thank you very much. But there is another question precisely about that, the repercussions of that opening on Georgia, but I don't think we've got time to answer it. So as we reach the end of our time, so unless anyone has any quick final remarks, if so, raise your hand. If not, then I think Eric says that he does. Okay, so very quickly, maybe two sentences.
Very quick one. I would like to answer to Nadia Rekliashvili's question. So first of all, the opening of the Turkish-Armenian border will have definitely impact on Georgia because the trade between Turkey and Armenia won't be on the territory of Georgia anymore, and it is a big trade. To some calculations, Turkey is our fourth trade partner, and losing that for Georgia would be important. But regarding the Azerbaijani-Turkey trade, the main valuable asset in that trade is the oil and the gas, and the pipelines are built on the territory of Georgia, so that won't change. Other than that, there is not that much of not so much of a trade between Azerbaijan and Turkey.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Regarding that part, nothing really there's no danger for Georgian interest.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the very quick answers to the question. So yes. So I think on that note, again, unless anyone has a very quick comment now, I think we'll end the meeting. Oh, Marina does again. So one will. Go on.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just my last comment, because I think just to finish on a positive note, because all of us, we tend to talking about the Black Sea, it's all doom and gloom, we talk about, war and conflict and instability. And what we've started to think about actually is how this regional order can get reshuffled, and what opportunities may arise. And we with colleagues often look into the future and thinking about what can happen after Ukraine's victory and Russia's defeat, and what new regional, formats can appear there. And I think talking about, current situation, recognizing how dramatic and bad it is, we should be thinking what needs to be done on this track, to improve the situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marina. I'm a natural pessimist and I'm grim about everything, so we need you to balance me out there a little bit. But yeah, on that note, I think for the third time, I'm going to try and end the meeting. And this time, I think I'll be successful. So I just want to thank you all for coming. It was a very interesting conversation. And I think I've heard some very astute analyses from all three of our speakers today. If only our respective governments had as nuanced a view and as expert a view as you three, I think we'll have solved all the problems already in terms of our regional connectivity. But alas, that is not so. But thank you very much for coming. And yeah, I guess I'll bid you all farewell on that note. So thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.